So Kedar earned the caption that, he could feed bullshit to the bull.
Sell, not feed.
So before HyperVerge existed as a company, we were a bunch of students at IIT Madras working on this technical club called Computer Vision Group. And this was back in 2009, 2010, and we used to participate in different kinds of robotics competitions. So flying drones that had to go inside buildings, read signs written on the rooms, pick up objects and come out. Then drones that had to go underwater, all different kinds of robots that had to navigate using computer vision. And in several of these competitions, we used to go head on head against some of the best college universities in the world, MIT, CMU, Stanford, all of these guys, and we used to do very well in all of these competitions. So around the second year, one of the things that we realized was that while we were participating in all of these competitions and having fun and doing interesting activity, it felt like overall we were just being like kids in a toy store. Right? See, if you put a kid in a toy store, they might just be fascinated by everything that is around. Every toy is new, every toy is interesting, every toy is fascinating. But at the end of the day, they'll just drop all the toys and leave, right? Nothing essentially has come out of it. So in essence, we were playing around with technology toys. Everything that we were doing was new, it was interesting, but nothing essentially changed in the world because of whatever we did. So around that time, we decided that if we were going to do anything moving forward, then we should be solving some real problem for someone. So our first big breakthrough happened when Southern Railways approached IIT Madras with a problem. Electric trains have this overhead line that carries power. So this is a 25 kVA line. The engine has a structure called a pantograph, which is on top of the engine, which applies pressure upwards to maintain contact with the overhead line. And if this overhead line is not at the center of the track, but if it is slightly misaligned, the pantograph can tilt and the line will slip and snap. And you have a live 25 kVA line that is lying on the track, right? And in our countries, people just walk over the track and go. So it was a real serious threat to human lives. And around the time, the kind of solution they had was that you have three people sitting inside the maintenance wagon. There's a glass panel on top of the engine. So one guy sits there, he looks up at the pantograph from inside and he shouts out a reading that, +7, +20, something. There's a second guy who sits near the window, who's peeping out of the window, and he's shouting out mass numbers. Pole number 5, pole number 6, pole number 7. And there's a third guy who's sitting with a register and noting down the numbers that these two guys are shouting on, right? Obviously this is subject to so much human error. There is a lot of parallax, from where he's sitting and where the markings are. So this entire system was not actually preventing the problem from happening. And at the time, Southern Railways had come to us with this problem. 3 such incidents had happened in the previous 1 month itself. So it was a real serious issue for them. And when we started working on this problem, it was a complicated problem to solve, because any kind of electronic sensor that you put on top of the engine will have readings screwed up because of the induction due to the 25 kVA line. And we had to do a lot of iterations, and typically after 12 o'clock in the night is when there's not much traffic on the tracks and we could go and do our experimentation. So every day just after college, we start at 5 o'clock, we just plan for what do we want to try out that night, do prototypes and all that. And once we go there, we climb on top of the engine, set up our cameras, and then post 12 o'clock in the night, you can enter the electrified section of the track and you can do your experiment. But once you enter there, you can't go up and fix anything else, right? So it means that you can do one experiment in one night. If that doesn't work out, you have to go back to college the next day, plan whatever else, come back another day and try out your next experiments. Almost every night we used to be there doing iterations and come back, sleep early morning at between 5 to 8, whatever little sleep we could get
After 8 o'clock also.
in the classes. So for several days we were doing this, and things were not going anywhere. So one day we were doing an iteration of, and things suddenly started to work. And as a technologist, as a programmer, I was finally relieved that things were working after so much effort. Now there was this guy who used to ride, the maintenance wagon, who used to come with us for all of these iterations. So he was, this being a computer vision solution, on your screen you can see the output, you can see the input video, you can see the output, and what is happening and all that. So he's been watching whether it has been working or not, been with us through all the failed experiments and all that. So this day he started seeing the solution and working. And while we were relieved that finally things are working, he was like, sir, working, sir, working, sir, working, sir. He was so excited. And finally, later that night, we started, socializing a little bit with that guy. And he realized that, so this is a guy who runs the regular, electric trains, local trains during the day, from, 6 a.m. in the morning to probably evening 6 p.m., 8 p.m., whatever. And post that, every time any issue happens on the track, he runs the maintenance wagon anytime during the night. If this happens, he has to run there, he has to fix these things, and whenever the maintenance runs happen, he'll have to be there. And he was telling us that that time his daughter was in 10th standard, and he was feeling bad that he was not able to spend enough time with her when it mattered the most for her. And he was so happy with just the thought that something like this could solve the problem, and make things simple, and prevent these things from happening again and again, and could make his life better in some small way, right? And at that time this was just a prototype, we had not solved any problem. It was so far away from actually going to implementation or production. But even the thought that something like this could solve his problem and make his life better made him so happy, right? So, I tell people that that day if any other person had been in that situation and had seen their work contributing to someone's life in a meaningful way, then they would have started their company as well, right? So what we decided to do was that, looking at these experiences and several other things that people were going through, we realized that, we could make use of this, make use of whatever abilities that we have to build things, with our own hands and contribute to someone's life. So Hyperverge as a company was created as a platform for such smart people to come together and use their abilities to solve some problems for people and contribute to their lives in a meaningful way.
If I have to add an incident here, so a whole lot of what we eventually stand for comes to us through various situations in life, right? And it always so happens in your personal life before you live that in your professional life or something. Some incident in your life kind of wakes you up. For me personally, that wake up call in terms of contribution was when I decided to become an entrepreneur. I was already running a company for 2 years, which is an education company, focused on bringing emerging technology like robotics, machine learning, all of this to students who do not have access to this technology. And who are these students? So these are all local colleges, say in Tamil Nadu, local colleges in Chennai, where there are students who are as smart, there are students who have tremendous potential, but unlike an IIT or unlike a CEG or a top 1 or 2 colleges, they don't have the infrastructure to support students. They don't have the professors or teachers who will guide them. They don't have seniors who have already built these robots to guide them. So we started a company to do that. Now, while you do it as a student, it's a simple thing. You are just doing it as a student. There is nothing to lose. You are doing it in your time after your academics, and everything else is happening in the world the way it should, in your world. Now, once you decide to take the plunge to do it full time, Now suddenly your peers are working at a McKinsey, BCG, this, that. I had few campus jobs and there was a US job of which joining date was 6 months later. And that time I had one intern and I was running the show. You don't call it a CEO if you have one person working with you. So whatever, one founder. And I remember traveling to this college. So it was 40 kilometers away from Chennai. No bike, no nothing. So you had to take 3 buses and you don't reach the doorstep of the college. You reach somewhere from where you have to walk 1.5 kilometers. Now we are doing a robotics awareness session. So I am carrying at least 3 robots you have to show during the awareness session. After the awareness session, we want students to carry some information back. So you are carrying some pamphlets that they can take home. Now if they just take pamphlets back and don't give any feedback, then you don't know who to contact, who is interested in the robotics program. So you are also carrying some feedback forms. So basically about 1200 to 1500 sheets of paper and 3 robots and one person carrying this. So you can imagine the situation. And I was walking through about 1.5 kilometers and it was not a proper tar road, it was a dirt road. And I can see my shoes have become all brown. It's like you are in the middle of nowhere, Chennai sun, at 12 p.m. in the noon, and you are there. And while walking and while carrying that, at some point I just wondered, it just hit me, why the hell am I doing this? Like, you are in the middle of nowhere carrying all of these things, why do you need to do this? And it hit me so hard that if you choose the other option, then in 6 months time you could be in Bay Area. But I think that day, I think life puts you in a corner and I have to answer, right? What am I going to do in this situation? Somehow that day that answer came, that if I go back today, maybe nothing will change in my life. All of us coming from backgrounds that we come from, coming from the education systems that we come from, we will have a decent life, right? As in everyone has some set of dreams, we will get there by 35, 40, 45. But if you go to this college, it could mean a lot in the life of that student who is out there waiting, for whom no one is going to travel, no one is going to take this level of pain to come and teach them something. For that time our price was, I think, 5,000 rupees for a 6 month or a year long course. Who in the world will come to that place and teach this student emerging technology? So it hit me very, very hard that day that the choices we make may not make a big difference in our life, but it has the potential to make a big difference in life of the person who is sitting in front of you. And I think that was the wake-up call for me. As a fast forward to that story, so many students from that particular college I know. There is a student who has become an entrepreneur. He has his own company today. The Spark started with that program. We have students who have finished their PhDs and are now professors who are teaching in US. And the Spark started with this program. And funnily enough, somehow Hyperverge happened. And I think in a year's time, we were in Bay Area, went to raise $50,000, got $700,000 in funding from some of the best investors in the world. And there were 3 of us who were full-time at that time. Bracket, Kishore and I. Everyone else was still in college, including Vignesh. And we don't know how they funded us. We don't have US proper visas to work and we did not have a US company, but they ended up funding us. So then we had to get more full-time people. So one of the first calls we made was to Sai, and we said, leave everything you have got and come here. Usually companies get funded when they have an idea which has traction, which has some track record, and it can become big. We got funded on a promise that this technology is good, these guys are good, and they will create some product that will be useful for others. The problem was we did not know what product we will create.
The immediate set of people that we had access to was college students, and at that point of time the best idea seemed to be to build a consumer app, which would mean you can reach out to all of these people directly, and we had the technology of computer vision and deep learning, so we had to do something on photos. So we decided to build a gallery app which could organize the photos in your gallery, understand what's in them, so that you can search for things like, my photos with Kedar at the beach or something like that. We built the app, we had really good technology, we had scene recognition. Where was this photo taken? Is this a beach? Is this a forest? Is this a mountain? Is this a sea? Is this a cafe? Whatever. Looking at the image, it could predict what was the context in these photos. And we had face recognition, which could identify the people in these photos. And you put these two together, you can search for, things like that. And at that time, some of our investors told us that, see guys, this is a game, we understand that you're passionate about doing this and all that, but this is a game that only Google or Apple can play. And we didn't understand why. And we wanted to test everything ourselves, whatever hypothesis was thrown at us. We would want to go at it with full intensity and discover that ourselves. So we kept at it. Eventually Google Photos launched, and they did the two things that no startup could compete with. They made unlimited photo storage free and they became the default gallery app on Android phones, both of which were possible only by a Google or an Apple, which we realized that time it was so evident. And then, if this app had to be retained on the phones of people, then we had to figure out alternate ideas. And we were not just fighting for solving this problem. Once you end up building a consumer app, you're fighting for the user's time, screen time, against all other apps that are installed on their phone. Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. And for a consumer app to have good metrics, to have retention, to have virality, we ended up doing all kinds of gimmicks, including, face masks and stickers and whatnot. Then we started off with a particular intention, but then we were going down a completely different trajectory.
As a consumer app startup, no consumer is paying any money for your app. So basically there is no revenue, which means you're dependent on someone for your revenue. Unless they fund you, you cannot continue to go. Now, whoever funds you, is that a philanthropist? You are doing some amazing work, I'll keep donating money. No. They are people who are looking for returns on their investment. What is it that matters to them? It matters to them how much time a person spends on your app, how often they come to your app, because these are the metrics that matter in the consumer business. Right? So then, as a team, if you need your money, you have to do whatever they want, which is fair, right? Which is absolutely fair. Now, if you have to do whatever they want or whatever they are looking for, there is only one metric: how much time is a person coming and spending on this app every day? If you ask the question, is that time being spent, invested, or wasted? Then all of us know the answer. So largely you are looking to do that. Why is it that you go on a video app and it shows you the next video which has nothing to do with what you have watched, but it wants to keep you on that loop, right? That you keep watching something, you keep watching the next thing, you keep watching the next thing. And that's basically consumer business. So we realize that overall what we are trying to optimize is how to make a user waste time on your platform. And that's the only metric that the 13 members who are there, some of the smartest, most dedicated, committed people we know, we are putting our complete energy on figuring out how to make this user waste 20 minutes of his time every day on our app. So somewhere, I think when that realization hit us, somewhere I think there was a disconnect in what we as individuals stand for, most of us, and what through actions we were doing in the real world.
Somewhere we felt like we were making people waste their time, so we thought we should attack a lot more important problem. So we said healthcare is a problem. So again we say, what should we do in healthcare? So there are people eat lots of random junk. At that point we had funding, so we had an office cafeteria which was filled with 30,000 rupees of grub every month, including all random Maggi biscuits and everything. So we said all these are unhealthy food. Probably there is something that we could do in health, which could again be in our area of expertise of capturing a photo of the food and knowing what the food is and giving understandable insights, not it is carbohydrate of 100 grams, it is protein of 30 grams. How can we make it more personalized and give inputs for people on whatever food they eat? So we went ahead and met a lot of doctors. Doctors were astonished as to why these stupid people are asking such basic questions. And then Sai and I registered for a dietitian, went and met the dietitian, asked the dietitian how should we follow diet, and then she gave us, it was a very costly dietitian, so she took 3,000 rupees from us and gave us a katori The katori was this size. She said, whatever you have it in the katori, your weight will drop. So we came back and started following that diet. Actually, I lost good amount of weight. What we realized is this was not going anywhere. What we thought was impactful and what people thought they need. So there was this complete mismatch that we were going through. And what at one point we decided it's best we go to the next level and worry about this question. Let's all combine our energies into building the photo sharing app, taking it to 100,000 people, raising some more money, and then we'll figure out what to do. It's like doing an MBA after your engineering, just so that you have more time to figure out what you have to do.
So the wishful idea was, let's become $1 billion company first, and then we will start contributing. Okay, somehow you are a consumer app, like imagine Instagram that became $1 billion, and now we are doing to do good for people. Like lots of weird ideas. The funniest thing I remember from that time is, I know people, Rajat, Anusha, Vishrant, these were the people. Every week I had to have a conversation with them on why are we even building this app? What are we doing at Hyperworld? So the routine used to be, they would come to me every week, sometimes 2 times a week, and say, hey, what the hell are we doing, man? Then we would go on the terrace, we would take a half an hour, 45-minute walk. I would somehow convince them that focus, we will get somewhere and then we will do something. If we have ability to reach billion people, then we will do something. I think my main role, I don't understand product a lot. So KV understands.
Chief convincing officer. Whenever you have a confusion, just come here, he'll convince you of whatever bullshit is needed to be convinced at that point.
So Kedar earned the caption that, he could feed bullshit to the bull.
Sell, not feed. So that was the phase. So they always say team, technology, traction. We always had the team. We always had decent technology. The question mark was always traction, and that we never got for a very long period of time, in spite of doing everything we did. So the reality was 6 months of money left. No product has traction. And at that point, we had run out of all ideas also. So we just sat, as in, of the rare occasions it has happened in life, we were like, man, we don't want to build anything, any new thing. We had few ideas, but we knew the limitations of them as well.
One of the ideas that we came up with is our parents call us every day asking how to use WhatsApp. So there should probably be a tool which will help parents understand how to use WhatsApp. That was an actual idea on the board, right? So like this, we had a lot of other crazy, interesting ideas which we in our heads thought.
What happened incidentally around that time is, because 6 months of money was left, conversations with investors have to begin, because if you want to raise a new round, it takes usually 2 to 3 months to close it, and doing it last moment is very risky. This was November of 2016, and we also started getting hit by inbound emails from large organizations, tech organizations, like Microsoft, Alibaba, Amazon. All of these guys started reaching out with inbound saying, we are interested. The situation in the world was such that time that AI and awareness related to AI had just started increasing after 2014. Deep learning had just started increasing after 2014, and at 2016 everyone was talking about AI, and most of the large companies hadn't focused on it, because there have been AI winters that have been so long that everyone who has worked on AI has known in past that it doesn't work, and some limitation comes and they stop working on it. So because of which most large companies did not have very focused research on AI, and they wanted to acquire companies. So acquiring companies was one of the best ways to get teams. Acquiring research labs. So there have been companies that acquired an entire research lab, including the professor, their students, and even the secretary of the professor they acquired, saying we want the entire lab. We don't want to change anything. So that was that time. We heard CMU's lab was being, Uber was going after that. So we were hearing that, which meant Hyperverge was in the position to exit, because the technology was good, patents were filed, team was very good. And so we knew that if we focused and executed well on it, after talking to the investors and all, we realized it could be a $15 to $20 million acquisition. Now looking at it as an outcome for the team, just look at all folks from the team at that point of time, right? everyone comes from a middle class family. Their parents have been working at an organization maybe for 20, 30 years kind of a job. No one comes from family of means. Everyone has come from a middle class background. All of these folks just, out of the passion for computer vision group, etc. A whole lot of them did not even sit for campus placements and they have just joined us. So there were people who joined us for 60,000 rupees salaries and all per month. And outside anywhere in the world, they would be making maybe a double or a triple of that. So one, you genuinely care for all of these people because in many ways they are like your younger siblings, right? So you would not want anything wrong to happen to them. Founders have also been in a, founders started with like a 20,000 rupees salary that went to 40,000. Okay. Okay, I think bracket says 8,000. Every time salary increased, the people who celebrated the most, I remember, was Bracket and me. We would come home and like celebrate and all. 10,000 rupees more we are going to make next month on. We are genuinely poor. So it means a good outcome for a company that started in 2014 is exiting at maybe a $15 to $20 million acquisition. Every person in the team is maybe going to make about 300, 400K USD. Founders will make more. And after that, you are not working for a random company. You are getting acquired by one of the best tech companies in the world, which means for next 1 or 2 years, you will be in a great environment from where you can again start your own company and all of that. So that was the path that maybe 90% of the people thought that, that's the path that is going to be for Hyperverse. And at this time, instead of Vignesh taking a decision, I taking a decision, Kishore taking a decision, Sai taking a decision, Bracket taking a decision, we thought this is about lives of maybe the 13 people who are with us. And it's important that they are included in this decision on what happens to the future of Hyperverse. It's unfair if 2 people decide and tell the team that this is the final decision. So that's what brought us to that one legendary pantry. So that pantry was a pantry where no one came, only Hyperverse was there. So that became our meeting room for maybe multiple days. And the conversation around future of Hyperverse started. So one exercise that we did actually is everyone had a piece of paper and everyone wrote down if they had to work on an idea where they don't get paid and they have to work for the next 20 years or 30 years in that area, what is it that they would want to work on. So through that, I think many people came to problems such as education, healthcare. Anusha, I remember, wanted to do something for rural employment, where she wanted to build a factory which employs a lot of rural folks. So each one of us, different people came up with these different ideas. A whole lot of these ideas were focused on making a fundamental difference in life of people. So we had spent a lot of time doing a perception play. Perception play is the shirt I'm wearing, right? So I wear it, I may feel good for 5 minutes, but nothing in my life changes because of this shirt. We all eat biscuits. If I have a biscuit, the person who is making a biscuit is trying to figure out everything. What should I do with this biscuit? They are figuring out newer and newer ways. Orange cream, pineapple cream, this cream. When they are done with all creams, chocolate chips, then they figure out chocolate inside biscuit, biscuit inside chocolate. All iterations, permutations, combinations. Anyone who has done anything with biscuit in the world, let's do it. However, you as a user, when you eat a biscuit, nothing really changes in your life. So if the summation of all work that person has done maybe through their life is taken, maybe all their effort was just about putting some extra sugar in you. That was not necessarily good for your health. So this is what I would call as a perception problem. The value of this problem comes from perception of people, because I perceive that this biscuit is valuable and I should pay 30 rupees for it. That's the perceived value of it, and someone is working on that perceived value. The challenge in perceived value is there is no true north. There is no true north in terms of if I wake up, I know clearly why am I doing this. In education, for example, there is a true north. For example, in Lemma Labs, there has not been a day where I've woken up and I have had to wonder why should I go to office. So that's the difference between a fundamental problem and a perception problem. What we were building as consumer apps started with a fundamental need but very quickly became a perception problem of how to keep users engaged, face masks, all of these things. So the consensus that we all reached was that if society, money, none of these things are a challenge, then we would want to work on fundamental problems. So that was the first big insight that came out of that locking ourselves in the pantry area. Thankfully it was pantry area, it had food.
So when we went and told our investors that we are not going after these acquisition offers, and instead we want to work on these kind of fundamental problems such as education, healthcare, rural employment, any of these areas, right? So they told us a very simple thing. So you guys have 3 months or 6 months of cash left in the bank. So as a startup, you are essentially fighting for survival. So when you are in this situation, there is very little that you can do. If you take any of the problems that you guys are talking about, to even create a dent in any of these areas, to make a very small contribution to education or healthcare or any of these areas, requires so many years of time and effort, and economic ability, money to be able to put into these areas, that with 3 months time and cash left, there's hardly anything that you guys can do, right? That was disheartening at that time to know, because we felt that we had rediscovered our purpose, and now we were all full of energy. We knew that now we have this clarity, we have to go after it. But then our investors broke down the reality for us. It's good to be optimistic about something, but it is another thing to know the reality. But we still insisted that this is what we want to do, and we asked them, you tell us how. We are clear that this is what we want to do. We understand that we have 3 to 6 months of cash left in the bank, but these 13 people are ready to do whatever it takes to come out of this situation. We are ready to put in 20 hours if needed every day, do whatever it takes, but we want to get out of this situation. You tell us if there is any way possible, right? And that is when we got some really good insights which set us up for the next stage of the company.
A startup doesn't have time, and to make fundamental change in the world you need time. So they gave a good suggestion. Figure out how you make money as individuals first. Exit good companies, build some companies, and once you have money, you can do what you want with that money. We reflected on that answer, but see, the people that we had put together, the team that we had put together, what were the chances that you will get this team back? Most of the members of that team, we know from their first month in college. They have stood by us through thick and thin. They have stood by us through all of those ideas that we spoke about which never worked, and they still stood by us for not 6 months, for not 1 year, for 4 years, 5 years, did not sit for placements, did not go further to do a master's, PhD, whatever. How would you get these 13 people again? So that was the big question. If we lose this team, then we lose everything that we have created in the last, maybe in the outside world we haven't created a big dent, but just bringing together these smart people who are so committed was the only asset that we had at that point of time. And if we sold the company, we would be selling that asset, the most valuable thing we have. So that was the time when somehow, because of these reasons, because of thinking of this team splitting and going its own ways, it was not an answer that we could digest. We spoke to a whole lot of people. Finally, the person that we met was Sridhar Vembu. I know he was somewhere in US. I was at a little dingy hotel in Chennai, and I had sent him an email and I asked him, when can we speak? He said, how about now? And it was, I think, 1 o'clock at night. I hadn't done anything productive that day, but I said, I think this is an important call, and we got on the call. He heard us out, and it wasn't even an in-person meeting. I think it started out with just a call. And in that call, he gave so much clarity that we knew that I think we have found our way. So Sridhar Vembu spoke about Zoho and what they have been able to do at Zoho. For those who don't know, Zoho is one of the most successful product companies from India, maybe the most successful. It today stands at about $900 million in revenue. And the significant part of this story is that it is completely bootstrapped. It was bootstrapped from the time when it was like Hyperverge, a bunch of people, and it kept growing to a $900 million in revenue. To compare, Salesforce, which is the leader in the space that Zoho used to be in, is maybe at $5 billion in revenue, with all kinds of funding raised, everything. So on one side, Zoho built a very strong enterprise business, a very robust enterprise business. But if you go and look at what they have done under the hood, you will find so much value, so many things that they have innovated on. So one of the initiatives that Zoho had is called Zoho University. In Zoho University, they go to rural Tamil Nadu, tier 3, tier 4 towns, villages. They go to corporation schools, which are schools run by municipal corporations, municipality schools. How many of us know anyone in our social circle who has studied in a municipal corporation school? Just raise your hands. Even your maids and cooks and all don't have their kids in the corporation school. They are also sending their kids to private school. So imagine what a corporation school environment or a municipality school environment is like. They pick up kids from these environments whose father is a farmer, whose father is a cycle repair shop guy, mother is most likely a housewife, or she is working in someone's house, she is a housemaid or something like that. They go to these places where a kid likely to go to engineering from such a background, the chances are so limited, or to a medical, or to even a BSc and all is a big leap. So they go to these schools, they pick up kids who have the right attitude, who have the right aptitude, and they bring them to Zoho University. At Zoho University, they are provided a internship, they are provided training. Now, since this is such a raw material, they have to train them on programming, they have to train them in how to speak English, they have to train them on how to work in a team. Basic training, that a professional would need. In a year, they have an internship at Zoho. In 2 years, they have a job at Zoho. So many folks who do well at the end of their 4 years are actually making about 4 to 6 lakhs, which is more than an IT company's package in some of the good colleges out there. We met people who are in the machine learning team at Zoho, which is a team that is absolutely fabulous, very smart people, very committed people, who are now making about 30 lakhs or so, who have come from this background. We have heard of people who are making more in Zoho as annual compensation, who come from this background. Now, apart from this growth that they have had at Zoho, the thing that actually brought tears to our eyes, where while the kid is 18 years old, right out of 12th standard, to be in Zoho University, instead of them having to pay fees and all, Zoho is paying them 10,000 rupees as stipend to be there and learn, apart from arranging for food, stay and all of these things. So that kid, when he's 18, is earning 1,20,000 rupees, which is more than his family income, and he's supporting his family from the age of 18 without having to lose out on education, opportunities and all of that. So the confusion after that was, okay, we have 6 months money left, how do we do this? And that too, Sridhar was so kind, he just said 2 things. Right now, don't think of this, that, just think how you will make $500,000 in your first year. That is the amount of money you need to survive. The second insight he gave is $500,000 from 2 customers who will pay $250K each. Don't go after small, don't waste your time on many other things. The third thing he told is, one of them could be Zoho. We were like, great, we made a presentation with 10 ideas, went to Zoho, and actually Zoho was our first customer. Zoho was the first customer who signed up with Hyperverge with a 125K prepaid. It was like a grant of sorts to Hyperverge, and that actually gave us the confidence, the ability that, okay, we can do this?
See, in this entire example of what Zoho did with Zoho University, they did not have to wait for the system to change, right? By virtue of building a large organization that stands the test of time, that is independent, that is able to economically sustain itself, they were able to figure out how they could contribute themselves, right? Using whatever ability they had. So that was a very important lesson to learn. If we could end up building an organization that stood the test of time, that exists in the world as an economic force, then we could use all of that ability to contribute to people on our own terms. Right? So that was a very important lesson for us.
Even if it's not a million people whose life is changed, by doing what they did, 1/3 of Zoho is built of people from Zoho University. They have made a fundamental difference to lives of these 1,000 families at least, few thousand families at least. Maybe 100 teams like Hyperverge will look at it, get inspired, and who knows, over a period of 20-30 years, it would mean a difference that can cascade to a life of 100,000 people. So that for us was the first time we could understand how doing good, contributing to people's life, all the things that we were passionate about can come together with economics, with being a successful, commercial, profitable organization. If you see 200 years back, military leaders mattered a lot, right? Because it was the military leader who could have the biggest impact on lives of people. They could either wreak havoc or they can have a very good rule. If they did not protect boundaries, someone else would wreak havoc. If you look at the last 100 years, political leaders had the biggest impact. We don't remember necessarily who are the military generals across last 100 years, but you remember a prime minister or a president who has been appointed, because the political leadership mattered, because there was decent amount of peace within a country. You are still at war with others, but within a country there is decent amount of peace, and the political leader mattered a lot. Now, as we see the next 150 years, it is the economic leadership that has potential to have the highest impact on lives of people. A political leader has to get elected every 5 years, right? So as they get elected, they have to run behind whatever they promised to whoever they promised. By the time they are done doing that, new set of promises have to be made, and how much energy and time is lost in this. Our country doesn't have election happening with all states at the same time. So the same political leader is also running around here and there and there and there because there is election happening somewhere else. In all of this time, after all of this time, they have to think about, okay, what is it that we need to do for people? So with all of these challenges, political leadership is working on creating whatever impact they can create. The advantages that they have is they have scale. If they create something, it has ability to reach 1 million people. But to create something fundamentally powerful is not easy, because they have so many compromises they have to deal with. For an economic leader, you have been there for such a long period of time. You have been through governments, you have been through people who like you, don't like you. You have most likely stood through a generation. You have developed relationships through that generation. You are earning your own money. You have ability to hire the most capable people. You have ability to let go of people who are not right, not good, toxic, whatever. The tools that you have are much, much, much better than what any other kind of leadership has today. It may not be a tool that can go out to 10 million people or a crore people. But if you talk about a smaller segment of people, 10,000 people, 1 lakh people, the economic leader has a lot of capability to do that as an organization. So the next 100 years are going to be about economic leadership having tremendous impact on lives of people. They have already had, but tremendous impact. Second thing to look at is we have come, see the state of our planet. We have come to this state with utmost importance given to economics alone. Nothing else matters. Economics matters. It's making money, job done. you see most large companies at scale, the way they look, they are not at all good for human well-being. The other scary part of it is that no one can change this company's direction. It is going to have significant impact, but no one can change its direction. A CEO cannot say, we are going to become a better company, because he is not the CEO who started it or anything. He is just a person who has come on board. They'll say, okay, we'll get a better, different CEO who will give more results. A director cannot change, an employee cannot change, no one can change its direction. It's like a wild elephant wreaking havoc. So, in building an organization, when economic organizations are going to have such a big impact, if an aware organization is not there, it can do so much damage at the same time to mass number of people over many, many years, and you cannot do anything about it. A politician also cannot intervene in this. How can you intervene? These organizations have been there for 100 years, and it has brought the planet also to where it is. Just see the state of the planet. We are trying to uplift all human beings to a better standard of living. If everyone starts living like United States, the way people live, we will be done with the planet in maybe, I think, next 50 years. So all empowerment and all that we talk about, it will destroy the planet and there is nothing that is left. Now, this is where pure economics has brought us to. It is very, 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 very important that we show that it is possible to create an organization where economics is important. It's a means of getting to an end, but the end still is human well-being. See, when Zoho was built, one Zoho tells 100 smart people in the world that it is possible to do it. And for those 100 smart people, it is the only thing they need. Idea is not to build one hyperverse, all these people, bind them, you be here, never go anywhere. It's not the idea. Idea is, can we first show that it is possible? Second, can we create these 100, 1000, whatever number of leaders who have lived it for the period of time that they have the confidence to go out there and say, we will also do it. And then we do whatever it is in our power to support them. Because a traditional VC may not like what idea they have. A traditional angel investor may not like the returns that look on that business. But in this leader going out there and doing something in the world is our ability to not just solve 3 problems in the world, but indirectly at least support, 100 teams that are working on 100 different problems in this country or in the world. A lot of people ask long-term vision and they want to hear a great AI company, the best in world in AI and things like that. See, technology and many of these things are very contextual and they keep changing. Context is something that changes continuously. So what is it that is unchanging? What is it that we will continue to strive for, no matter how the context is changing today, tomorrow, etc. When we had to ask this question, the one thing that is genuinely meaningful, that will continue to stay, if we can build an organization which is focused on contribution, at the same time is one of the largest economic forces out there in the world, right? It is absolutely worth fighting for.